Hey guys, my name is Ashton Gleckman, and welcome to Behind the Score, Season 2, Episode 8. So, some of you may know this, most of you probably won't, but The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is my personal favorite score of all time. Everything from the orchestration to the harmony to the incredible themes, all the way to the way for which it just melds so incredibly well into the visual world. And then you have the battle scene and the ethnic elements and the choral elements. For me, it's just encapsulates everything that I love about film music. And it's definitely something that's truly close to my heart because it's something that got me interested in wanting to pursue film music. And so I'm super excited today to be analyzing a little bit of the music. So we're going to do this pretty similarly to how we do it most of the time. So we're going to listen to the piece of music that I've recreated, which is actually a piece of music from the ending of the film. It's the final 6 minutes of the movie. And then we're going to check out the some of the themes from the film, and then go into some of the composition techniques, and then we will begin to analyze this piece of music, and then we'll go into some of the technical aspects as well. So all those chapters will be down below if you're interested. But without further ado, welcome, and I will see you soon. Narnia is a series of books written by the author C.S. Lewis. And within these stories, there's so much rich character, and there's huge landscapes, and there's almost music written into the text. It's so incredibly multidimensional. And we're going to sort of go through the various themes that Harry uses to describe different elements within the story. We have themes like the battle theme, joyful theme, the Lucy and Tumnus theme, the lullaby theme, the wardrobe/magical theme. And then we're going to go into some of the compositional techniques that Harry uses within the score. So I think the first thing to do is to just start going through the themes and to take a look at the ways for which he develops the story within the music. Just a little bit of a precursor. The score was recorded, I believe, at Todd AO, which I think was shut down somewhere like 2007 after the second National Treasure movie, Trevor Rabin score. And Todd AO isn't a scoring stage, so they recorded Prince Caspian, which of course was in 2008, I think. And they recorded that at Abbey Road Studio One. So the first theme we're going to be looking at is the battle theme, or also known as the Narnia theme. It's sort of a very big, powerful theme that sort of describes the world of Narnia. And whenever anybody really thinks of the Narnia score or the film in general, they usually are going to be thinking of this tune. There's that theme. As you can tell, it has a very powerful rising feeling to it, and it's used during that battle scene, and it's also used during the, I think, going to Aslan's camp. That might be the cue that it's called. So the second theme is the joyful theme, and this is used in quite a few places.
Don't you worry, dear. Your brother's got you well looked after.
And I don't think you'll be needing...
So the next theme that we have is the Lucy and Tumnus theme. And this theme is used to describe the relationship. And the interesting thing about this theme is that it's also used in the second film as well, but not in the same context. Because Tumnus is not around during the second film, so it also has another element to it as well. But I'm not completely sure about what that is. But here is this theme. So the next theme that we have is called the lullaby theme. And this theme is played in the film where Lucy is brought back to Tumnus' house, and Tumnus has to play this theme so that the White Witch knows that a human is, within his sights, and he had pretty much made a deal with the White Witch that he has to turn in any human or else he will be captured by the White Witch. So this theme is played when they're sitting by the fire, because he has to turn her in. So it has a very dark quality to it. It goes like this. So there is that. As you can tell, it's pretty dark, and it has a very Middle Eastern quality as well because it's played on the duduk. which is a Middle Eastern instrument, and it has this pedal note like on E, and then the second duduk comes in on that exact same octave and actually plays over it. So it's very, very sort of nicely crafted and has a very dark quality to it, which is exactly what it should have contextually, because of the way it's being used, of course. So this next theme that we're going to talk about is called the wardrobe theme, and this is used all throughout the film, and in the second film as well, during very magical moments. And it's a very light feeling. Of course, the whole entire thing is magical because you can't really enter a wardrobe and be in a world full of speaking beavers and lions. But at the same time, there are certain moments in the film that have a certain majestic quality, and that's is sort of what the theme is used to describe. So here is that theme. So then it goes off into the second part, which is sort of used throughout the two films during moments that have a certain emotional rising element. This last main theme of the film that we have is the Evacuating London theme, and this is even more of like a progression, but it's used a lot throughout the two films, Prince Caspian and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it goes like this. So there's some of the main themes from the first film. We have the battle theme, joyful theme, Lucy and Tumnus, lullaby, wardrobe, and then the Evacuating London progression. Themes are so important because they're composer's way of capturing musical ideas into small fragments that can then be expanded upon. So it's so important always, whenever you're writing a score, a lot of the times, is to start from the small ideas so that you can then, build a tree up from that small little seed. So with Narnia, there's so many of these musical seeds that blossom so incredibly beautifully. It's a perfect example of why, for me, this is my favorite score of all time, is because there's so many musical ideas, but each of them are so incredibly well executed. And for me, every single theme has its own place within the story. A lot of the times you'll find a lot of composers just sort of inserting dozens of themes into the film, and then you're like, what is this? What is this? This is the theme for the villain's mom. I don't know how that's connecting with this. You know what I mean? But with this film, there's a certain amount of themes, but each of them he pays a certain amount of attention to each of them. So it's not too much, it's not too little, it's the perfect amount of harmonic or thematic content, and for me that's why it works so incredibly well. So let's talk a little bit about some of the composition techniques used throughout the score. So one of the main ones is suspensions. Now, a lot of you might be familiar with suspensions, but they're an amazingly powerful tool to help create emotion. And they're used all throughout the film. They have like I said, a really, really great emotional impact. So suspensions are heavily utilized throughout the whole score. If you listen to it, you'll notice. Second is the use of choirs. Now, some of you might know this, others perhaps not, but Harry was raised in a very sort of classic vocal school. I forget the name of it, St. Paul, St. John's, in England. And so he learned the ways of proper voicing and the way for which choirs are written. And it's a very particular way as well for which choirs are sort of voiced to create the most impact. So he used in this score the Bach choir, which actually are not used on a lot of film scores. Really, a lot of Harry scores, sure, like Kingdom of Heaven, the 2 Narnia scores. But other than that, they're not heavily featured on film scores, which is quite surprising because they're very talented. So choirs are used all throughout in very grandiose moments to help create a very regal quality. Right, so there's so much possibility in terms of using choirs in this score because it's a magical world full of so much, and choirs are a great tool for that. So next thing is the ethnic elements. So the thing that I love about the score is that there's ethnic elements that are blended so incredibly beautifully into the score, and you almost don't even notice them. So there's the cantele, something like that. But it's a stringed instrument. It's almost like a harp, but laid down flat. It has, I think, 32, 35 strings on it. And it has a very beautiful quality to it. And it's used throughout the score to create very shimmery effects. We also have, I believe it's a gamelan, actually. I don't know for sure, but it's a very bell-like instrument with a lot of mid-range, and that's why I presumed it was the gamelan. That's what I used in the suite that I recreated because it has the effect that I think the score gave off. So I'm not completely sure whether that is correct because, of course, I don't have the score. Everything behind the score is from ear purely. So that's the fun thing about it, is that it's just an ear exercise. But still, it helps us understand a lot about how to achieve certain effects. So the next thing I want to touch on is the ethnic elements. So I love how a lot of the ethnic elements are seamlessly sort of blended into the score. One of them is the cantele, I believe that's how you pronounce it, but it's almost like a harp laid down. There's tons of different strings on it, either 32 to 35, and it has this very shimmery quality to it. And it's used all throughout the score, blended in, with the harp and with the celeste to create a very, very, like I said, shimmery texture. Next we have this, I think it's a gamelan actually, but if not, it's this other type of bell instrument. And it's used all throughout, it's used in Evacuating London, it's used in that final cue that we're going to analyze today. And so it's used all throughout. But I'm not completely sure whether it's a gamelan. Of course, I don't have the score. He's the only one with that. But for me, sonically, a lot of mid-range, a lot of, again, it has that bell-like timbre, so I would presume it's a gamelan. Next thing is the variety of influences. So you have some more modern/hybrid influences, with some of the percussion that you hear in cues like Evacuating London at the end there. It's almost like it's like a drum machine or something like that. It's really, really cool. And then you have Middle Eastern, of course, with the lullaby theme. And then you have the African tribal, with cues like the stone table. A lot of that cool percussion. And then, of course, you have your classic orchestral influences as well. So the next thing that we have is the vocalist Elizabeth Scott. So this is used throughout the score to create a very ethereal effect. see all these different elements sort of coming together to create the score. And like I said, there's so many influences and so many aspects that go into making it really what it is. And those are just some of them, but that's just a little bit into the composition techniques used in the score. All right, so let's begin to analyze this piece. So the reason why I chose this piece in specific is because it's the last piece of the movie. And for me, it's not only the finale of the film, but it's also the finale of the score. So we bring back a lot of sort of the main themes that we have come to know in the film, like Lucy and Tumnus's theme. We have the Narnia theme. We, of course, have the wardrobe theme over here. And so it definitely gives us a good outline for the overall sound and tone of the soundtrack. So we're just going to break down each individual section. So let's start all the way at the beginning here. And you can see we start out with this penny whistle, which is a ethnic woodwind instrument. And then we have our harp above that, which is just sort of really adding a little bit of movement. And then we have a long string sustain above that, which is playing a fifth. And then when we introduce these other strings on bar 5, these are actually just taking a minor third inversion or a minor third interval and just moving them up. And he uses that quite a bit. There's another example that we're going to get to in a bit, but he uses that technique quite a bit within the soundtrack as well. So So now with bar 8 through 14, let's talk over that. So we introduce, you can see our horn melody. Which is pretty much just played on one of the horns, the solo horn. And then below that, we have our string sustain supplying the harmonic content. And just to fill in the harmony, we just have included a bass as well. And then below that, we have the piano, which is sort of playing this this arpeggio, or not an arpeggio, but an ostinato. And then we also have the harp, which is really outlining the harmony, which in this case is D minor, A minor, B flat. Then we have A minor first inversion. So that's all that we have going on during bars 8 through 14. Let's play that all together. So now going on to 14 through, I believe, it's when the melody comes in. It's bar 23. Actually, it would be bars 22. So let's go over that. So what's interesting here is he's using an interesting sort of rhythmic device using these bell-like instruments called gamelons, and I believe that's what he was using, but if not, it's just an interesting bell-like instrument. And you can see that he's playing the melody in the piano, and the piano melody is being doubled by the harp one octave above. And that harp melody, which is one octave above the piano, is being doubled by the celeste. I mean, Harry's definitely someone who's known to use sonically interesting, instruments or textures to create sort of rhythmic patterns. And I think that this bell-like texture with the harp and then the piano playing the melody and then the doubling and the harp and the Celeste really creates a nice texture over the more conventional orchestra. So in addition, we also have this cello sort of counter melody being played. That's the solo cello, and that's being doubled by the ensemble cello. And again, similarly to what we were doing over here with the high strings, our choir is playing these moving minor third intervals. So now bars 22 through 37. Yeah, or 35. So this is when it finally brings in the melody and the high strings, and we sort of get to a much larger orchestrational environment. So let's just, first of all, start out just by listening to this one specific section. So let's start out with our strings. So you can see our melodies being played in the high violins. And then we have violins doubling those high woodwinds that we're going to take a look at in a second. And then again, our strings are providing our harmonic content. And then our cellos were sort of doubling this this horn line, which is playing sort of a counter melody to the main melody. So let's check out the choirs here. So for the most part, we're sticking to SATB, but you can see in the women's choir, we're sort of adding a little bit of Debussy here, just so we have, we can create a more larger, richer harmony. And then we have the men's choir usually sticking, in this case, just to two voices and really supplying the low end part of the choir. And then the Metropolis Arc 2 women's choir, which is a very soft choir compared to Lacrimosa, which is a lot more, large and sort of larger than life. I doubled the Lacrimosa with the Metropolis Arc just to make it a little bit larger. So then let's go over to our brass. So you can see during this section right here, our second horn just has this pedal note on D. Introduce that third voice. And all the horns come together here. And our first horn, of course, took the melody, doubling the high strings. And this is what that cello down here is actually doubling. So you can see right here. And then let's go up to our woodwinds. So you can see our flute is doubling the oboe, playing this line. Here's them both together. And then our bassoon is just supplying a little bit of the low end of the wind section. So you can see, like, when you combine the flute and the oboe, you get an interesting timbre. You know, the flute on its own is very sweet and innocent, but then the oboe on its own is very sophisticated. And when you combine them both together, it sort of creates a really, really nice timbre. So here is that whole entire section together. And so the harmony for the section, just to go over it really, really quickly. So we're on D minor, A minor, F major, C, and then we have E flat major, D minor first inversion, C sus4, and then C. So that's all that we have going on the harmony. So, all right, so now we're on to bars 33 through 41. So during this section, if you guys have ever seen any live performances of the Chronicles of Narnia, you know, whether it's the one they had in Vienna or the one that Harry gave a few years back, you find that a lot of the times, a lot of the live performance mistakes come in bars 33 through 40, because, you know, the way that the flutes are sort of tied together and work in parallel with the piano is very complex in terms of timing. I'm just going to play that. So you can see all we're doing is we just have two flutes. And the piano, but still, a lot of the times in the live performances, you find that this is when it gets really confusing for some of the players. But then we get into bars 41, which is in the movie pretty much when, you know, the camera rises up and is sort of like moving towards the castle, and so there's this huge flyover shot, and so it's literally a sort of grand moment. So I'm just gonna play that. So let's cover what's going on here. So let's start with bar 40. So you can see our strings come in, and we have this phrase being played. So we have these short notes and then these slurs. And those are being doubled by some more sort of close and upfront strings. And then our harmony comes in. So our mallets and our keyboards and our harp are again playing that texture from the beginning. And again, our piano is sort of, you know, doing a little bit of a ostinato, acting as like the main motor. And so all of that together, the strings, the bells, the piano, and the harp, all that together sounds like this. And now we bring in our horns. You can see we have these low chords with the tuba, the trombone, and the one of the horns. And then we bring in all of our brass voices. So you could see that, we started out with the lower end of the brass, and then when we sort of get to this really triumphant heavy part, we bring in the rest of the brass to sort of help to intensify the harmonic content. So then in terms of the woodwinds, let's just solo those out. Flutes are doubling the strings once we modulate to B flat minor. And our woodwinds are just sort of supplying a little bit of sort of sweetness to the texture. So now let's take a look at the strings for this next section. So you can see we have this Lydian thing going on the strings. And in terms of harmony for this section, pretty much we are, we start in G minor. Then B flat minor. And then now we play this section in the key of B flat minor. And I really like how he puts the third of the B flat minor chord in the bass. So if we just listen to our harps now, or not our harps, our choir, harps. So you can see our women's choir are really in charge of providing the power. And then we have the men's choir sort of supporting that. And then all the choirs together sounds like this. And then we also have a sub bass, just sort of highlighting the low end and just really adding something that the contrabasses really can't. You can see it's very soft and you can barely even hear it, of course, under everything else, but you can definitely feel it. So now going into 61. So you can see we end up here in B major with this Lydian. And we have this, again, this harp bell-like texture. And you can see just taking away that, it takes away so much life. then you add it in. So let's cover bars 73 through 82. So you can see we come in with this string line. Which is really just highlighting, you know, the chord changes. And in this specific section, we are D flat major, B flat major, G flat major, E flat major. So all that we're doing is we're taking, you know, every single chord, starting on the tonic, going down a half step, and then going up a fifth. So that's all that the strings are doing. So in terms of the woodwinds, so we start out with our sort of lower woodwinds. You know, you have our clarinet and our bassoons, and that really creates a nice warm woodwind texture. And then we introduce our flutes for the melody. So we don't have anything going on in our brass. We have a little bit of percussion just accenting, so some timpani hits, doubled with a bass drum just to add a little bit of low end. And then in terms of strings, you can see we have our, again, our main string supplying the harmony, while we have our string legatos. Violas are playing the melody. And then other than that, we really don't have too much going on. So here's that all together. So now this is really a pretty section. So we go, we have these sus4, and another sus4. So it's really, really pretty harmonically, and we have those big suspensions at the end. So this is really a section that is another big tutti section. So you can see our strings again start out pretty high, and then come in with the lower. And then the melody we have in the high violins, and then we have the bass playing, well, the bass, touche. And then we have just the violins, or the violas, filling in a little bit more. And then our violin twos come in just to double the melody and make it a little bit stronger. So then our choirs at this point are just the women's choir. And you can see those second inversions up there in the choir are very, very powerful because you get that super sort of highest voice, you know, doubling with the strings, and it sounds really, really powerful. So our woodwinds and our brass are pretty much, for the most part, playing all together. So you can see, you know, flute 1, oboe, bassoons come in, and then we bring in second flute, third flute. So you can see, like, our English horn, for example, is you know, playing the melody. We have the bassoons sort of playing the bass. And then we have the second bassoon playing the just sort of filling in a little bit more of that mid-range, and then we have the first flute playing the melody. Then we have the second and third flute harmonizing it, and then we have the oboe again playing what the first bassoon is playing, but like an octave higher. So all that together. And then for our brass, you can see our brass sounds pretty empty. All the voices aren't really filled in. Just have that first horn, that major second suspension right there in bar 83, and then we bring in everything else. So you can see we have our low end and the tubas. We have the French horn being doubled by the trumpet 1 octave above. And then we have the horn, I believe it's 2 and 3, helping to fill in the harmony. And you can see these, you know, the low percussion goes a pretty long way to help just accent these moments. And then under that, dynamically speaking, very, very low, we have the harp just sitting down there, adding a little bit of movement. So now let's go on to the next section. So we're going to cover bars 90 through 99. So we have some string tremolos just sort of sitting there. You can see they're very quiet, but add a sense of mystery, and texturally they're really, really nice under the melody, which is being played in the high strings. And we also have a little bit of that wardrobe theme, also on the piano. So you can see this little section is all about sort of like the mystery. And just little details like this in the writing, Harry's writing, you know, just very subtle, you know, harp phrases, these little tiny little runs heading into each bar. You know, they add something really nice. So harmonically speaking, see where we are. So F minor, B flat major. So we're going to that major 4. Then we're going to that D flat major. And you can see when we get to bars 94 or 93.5, you can see our melody now is tossed over to the low strings. So this is a pretty cool little technique. It's just, when you play the melody for the first time, have it in one register, then when you sort of repeat it, in this case with a little variation, you could toss it to the other ends so going from high to low or low to high, something like that. Adds a little bit of variation, makes it a little bit more interesting. So now we are heading into the crowning, which is an amazing, amazing moment. And this is sort of like the climax of the film, because this is when the main characters, of course, you have Susan, Lucy, Edmonds, and then Peter. This is when they're all being crowned at the end of the movie, and it's sort of the grand moment that everything's been building up to. So it's a very important moment musically. So he chooses to really bring in the main Narnia theme, and he starts out, very sort of soft and very beautiful and dynamically speaking. Very sort of timid with this, male choir singing the melody, and he builds up. He adds the female choir. Then you'll notice he brings it all together with this gigantic orchestra and choir tutti on bar 113. So it's a moment full of a lot of intensity, but it starts out very nimble and builds its way up in terms of orchestration, but also dynamically. So let's take this section by section. So let's start out first of all with our strings. So you can see our strings are, sort of more towards the low ends, really supplying, again, the harmony, and then we have the violas playing the melody, which is doubling the choir. Bring in violin 1. Makes the harmony a little bit more richer. Now we bring in the rest of the violins. Main melody. And then everything comes in all together. So that's what we have going on our strings. You can see, again, it's just sort of building in terms of orchestration. Starts out, fairly small with just the melody and the violas, and then the strings playing down there, just sort of highlighting the harmony that the choir sort of goes over, and then comes in a lot bigger, introducing more and more voices, introducing, first the violin, then the second violin, and then it, of course, brings in all the voices together, with a lot of intensity. And that's what we have going on in our strings. So now in terms of the choir, it's doing a very similar thing. It starts out with this monophonic male choir singing the melody. Now it brings in the women's choir. Children's choir. So you can see one of our male choir is actually just sort of playing the bass notes and really focusing on that. And then the other one is, you know, playing these big chords. And then our women's choir are, again, really the powerhouse of the section. And playing that suspension super high up there so it really sticks out of the orchestra. And so that's what's going on in the choir. As you can see, we're, you know, building voice by voice by voice, and then we have everything come together, that sort of grand moment right here, I believe, on bar 113. So that is the choir. Have the strings, and then now let's look at the keyboard. So again, the keyboard, they're doing this ostinato, followed by the harp. Celeste is doubling that. Glockenspiel is playing the melody that the voice is playing. All right. You can see if you get rid of, you know, that as well as the, you know, the harp and then the keyboard, it all becomes a little less, you know, it has a little less momentum. A lot less momentum. So adding that all in there. So you can see the bassoons are the only thing that's playing here. Then on bar 107, we have the high flute playing the melody. We have, you know, the third flute playing the counter melody, which is also being played in the strings as well. And then we also have the bassoons again supplying the bass, and then the English horn. That's covering the mid-range. And then when we bring in the main melody, of course, that is being brought in. So actually, the main melody isn't even being played in the woodwind section at all. The woodwinds are really just acting as a harmonic bed under the melody, which is being played then in the brass and in the strings. And yeah, so the woodwinds aren't even playing the melody whatsoever, but they are playing the counter melody over here. Let's take a look at what that counter melody actually is. So, you know, we start. Let's go all the way up back here. B major. Right, so the counter melody is. So it's this, and it just adds a little bit of So now for the brass. So you can see, let's go all the way back here. The horns are adding sort of some warmth to the strings. And then when we get to the you can see our horns are playing that counter melody. Melody isn't being played at all in the brass either. It's actually just the high strings. So then, of course, we have these big accents again. Big timpani roll. Then we have this big cymbal roll as well. And bass drum hits just for accent. And that is in addition, we also have the sub bass once again. So that is really all that we have going on within the larger sort of texture. So let me play that all together once again. All right, so now we are on to bars 124. Up to 136 for Lucy and Tumnus's theme. So this section is pretty small in terms of orchestration. We just have this very simple, violin. And then we have some other high strings playing the melody. A little bit of Puck Grand. And then we have this horn melody, which is pretty much a sort of a variation of Lucy and Tumnus's theme. And then under that is just a sort of string pedal note. And that's just sort of hanging there until we enter this next little section. So you can see we have, the piano being doubled by the harp, being doubled by the dulcimer, then being doubled by the cancelle, which adds just a little bit of that shimmer. Then the dulcimer begins to play 2 times as fast. And and that's what's under this entire section. And we are using an electric cello. I believe it's an electric violin from the actual film. Harry's somebody that's really, really good with using electric stringed instruments. He uses it all the time on Veronica Guerin, if you've heard that score. There's this one cue called Driving, and it's like, and it's like this Celtic-y Irish type thing. And so he uses a lot of electric, stringed instruments. And so I believe that's what this is. I guess that's the closest thing that I could find to what I heard on the soundtrack that I personally had in my sample bank. And I think it sounds pretty close. A minor, B flat major. You could see for a short little while here we brought back in the gamelan. And those strings come in. And all the strings are, of course, being layered by that sub bass. So this next section is, of course, the ending of the movie, and this is when it sort of jumps ahead something like 10 years later, and it shows them, as sort of adults, and they find the lamppost again, and this is sort of like the final time that it brings back the Narnia theme. So it's a really important part of the score and of the film as well. So when we first bring it in, we have this really, really nice sort of jumpy string line, which for me, like, it actually reminds me a bit of like what's happening on screen, which is like sort of the galloping of the horses and stuff like that. It has a very jumpy feel to it, and that is also, the ostinato strings. They sort of create that galloping rhythmic, quality as well. And then in addition to that, our horns or brass. We have, the horn solo being playing the melody, and then we have some more brass really filling in. And then I layered the horn solo with another horn just to make it a little bit more intense. There's that counter melody again, by the way. So let's talk a little bit about this modulation that happens right here. So we jump up a half step. G, C. So that's a pretty neat modulation, actually. So we're pretty much, we have this. We have this C sus4, and then the basses go G, C. So it's a really, really cool modulation because you just jump a half step, and it's really, really powerful, actually. And it actually, it gives a little bit of. It sort of leans you into that modulation. If we were to just go from C, it has a, definitely a rising power to it. So you can see during this section we have the let me just solo this one out. Violin 2 playing the melody, and the lower strings. Oops, something happened. But we have the violin 2s playing the melody, and then we have the low strings, of course, just really providing a little bit of support to the brass. And our woodwinds are, playing, something very similar to what our brass are playing. Lower flutes playing the melody. English horn is doubling the horns. Or the horn 1. So you can see the contrary motion going on here, by the way. So like the flute goes up, clarinet goes down. When the clarinet goes down, the bassoon goes up. So his writing is very, in terms of voicing, it's very sophisticated in terms of the way that the voices are moving, and the different inversions that are being used, and the way that he gets from one chord to the other using different voicings. It's very, very, very smooth. And then, of course, going into that, bar 155, the violins are taking care of the main melody. There's no choir here, no keyboards, so that's all that's happening here. We have this clarinet melody, goes to this B minor. Resolution, and then I inserted this last chord because, of course, the piece ends, once they get in the wardrobe, and then there's a song that begins to play for the ending credits, so it just sort of ends very awkwardly. So I just inserted this final crescendo just as a sort of grand closing statement. So let's talk a little bit about some of the technical aspects, and I thought it'd be interesting just to take you through my overall approach to how I actually do these behind the scores. So the first thing that I do is I listen to the soundtrack 2 times, straight through, just so I have an overall idea of, in this case it was the themes, and it was the way that everything connected with this final piece, and the way that everything sort of connects together in terms of the harmonic language and his overall stylistic approach to the film. And then after I sort of have that overall sort of bird's eye view, I'm able to go in and make my initial sketch, which in this case was on a simple piano. And so I just, I sketched out the whole entire thing on a piano all the way through bars, 170 something. So I had 6 minutes of sketches from, and then from that point I begin to build the orchestra section by section. And I'll go in, and for each one of these sections, the section, then the B section, crowning section, I'll actually go in and I'll do just the woodwinds, and then I'll do the brass, and then I'll do the percussion, and then I'll do the strings, then I'll do the choirs, and then I begin to blend everything together. I like to really, really get into the details in terms of each specific instrument's voicing, and I can't do that when everything is playing together, so that's why I like to go in and get each section down really, really well, almost like I would do on a full score piece of paper. You'd go in and you'd make all your editorial changes in each section until everything is sort of lined up, and then you mix, and then I'll mix everything sort of together so that it sounds has a sense of unity to it. So let's talk a little bit about the samples that I use. So I'm a big fan of Berlin woodwinds in terms of woodwinds. I think they sound super beautiful, very orchestral, great scripting, great legato, and awesome sound. If I just play this. So it has a really, really nice sound to it. And then for the brass, I think brass is an interesting category of sample libraries because there's so many different sort of styles of brass and samples. There's your very soft orchestral, brass that sounds very regal. There's your John Williams style brass that's very agile, like the sort of like the Caspians, that type of stuff, or the adventure brass. And then you, of course, have your big Hans Zimmer low brass, like the Symphony Series brass from Native Instruments. And then, you have really gritty Hollywood brass, like Cinebrass. So there's so many different styles of brass. But in this specific case, in this piece, the very orchestral, regal brass from Berlin Brass. I've said brass like 50 times. The brass from Berlin Brass was a great brass. Oh my god, you probably already turned off the video at this point. So that's what I ended up using most of the time here. And then I found this horn solo in Berlin Orchestra Inspire, and then I found this patch again, Berlin Orchestra Inspire. This is just the big brass patch, and I don't know why it says mutes, because it's not mutes, it's just the normal long. And then these are the horns from Symphony Series. So for the percussion, there isn't too much percussion in this piece. For this piece, most of the percussion is accenting. In a cue like the Battle, there's a lot of rhythmic percussion, on the snares and some sort of electronic drums and stuff like that. But in this piece, it's very, very orchestral, and the percussion is used similarly to how a lot of John Williams percussion is used a lot of the times for accents and for big sort of for big moments. So that's what the percussion is. And pretty much I'm only using Spitfire Percussion Redux, a little bit of Cineperc, and using that for the bass drum. For the strings are a little bit more difficult because I like different things from different libraries. So we can talk over that. So I like the legato from Berlin Orchestra Inspire because it's from Berlin Strings. I'll use that for the main violin melody. And then I also love the legato from Metropolis Arc 2 because it has a very upfront and up close sort of Benjamin Wallfisch, Danny Elfman type sound, which works really, really well for small, intimate moments if you want something really upfront. And then I also love the performance legato patches from Spitfire Chamber Strings because they are incredibly agile. You can go from playing staccato to sort of a slurred phrase. So those are fantastic. I use Mural for all of my sort of orchestral legato lines most of the time, where I'm doubling with the Spitfire Chamber Strings Consortino ensemble patch, which is where most of my string sound really comes from in this piece. And Mural is a great doubling with that, because they're both recorded in the same hall. And then we have, Mural longs. Then we have, again, that Concertino patch, which is just such a beautiful patch, by the way, if I just play. It has a super lush sound to it. And then flautando, which I'd like to use for the sort of like really high sort of pedal notes. Same thing with harmonics, but there wasn't any of that in this piece. We have some tremolo, Berlin Orchestra Inspire, really upfront sound. Mural, very symphonic, more ambient sound, recorded in Air Studios, so has a little bit more room to it. So those together sound pretty nice. Sound like this. Berlin Orchestra Inspire on its own, Mural on its own. And I put the lower of the two in Mural because it has a little bit more resonance. It works really well for that lower section, and the Berlin Orchestra Inspire, that high section, has a lot more, again, a lot more of an upfront sound. And when you combine those two, it has a pretty wide sound to it. So, and then we have the patch from, I think this is, what is this? Oh, Cinematic Strings 2. Okay, so yeah, I'm using this staccato ensemble patch from Cinematic Strings 2. The thing that I love about it is that it has this super agile ability to be able to do like no hesitation. A lot of libraries, when you try to do that, different notes have different lengths a little bit, and it's really hard to get things to sound right. And for this one, it's just so incredibly, you know, it has a super, super nice sound to it, and I use that for this section. So then we have a little bit of Metropolis Arc 2 spiccatos for that more upfront sound that we were doubling with the performance legato from Spitfire chamber strings. Ostinato strings for that more rhythmic chordal stuff. Electric cello from 8Dio. I believe this is Tina Guo cello. And then for the choirs, you know, choirs are an interesting thing because each choir library really has its own identity, and you know, different singers, different halls, different sounds, different overall styles. And for me, the Metropolis Arc 2 choirs are that really sort of nice, cool Danny Elfman, you know, type sounds. And the Lacrimosa choirs is a much more sort of intense, upfront sort of HC sound, you know, like something like this. Get such a great sound with that library. And yeah, so then we have that Metropolis Arc 2 for the men's choir legato for the crowning scene. So then I use Alicia's keys for most all of my pianos. It just has a great tone to it. And then gamelan. I actually doubled two different gamelans together to get this specific sound. I doubled a synth gamelan, which has a lot more mid-range, and then the real gamelan, which is a lot, you know, a lot more gritty and has that higher range. It has a little bit of like a tonal wobble as well. So when you combine the two, you get a cool sound. Here's just the synthetic one, and then the real one. And then I usually use two different harps, the Berlin Orchestra Inspire one for my orchestral harp, which sounds like this, and then the Angelic harp for my more intimate harp, which is a lot more upfront. The sub bass from Albion 3 Iceni has a great section called Underbass, and this is from the Juno synth. And then we also have some ethnic elements as well. So a plucked grand from the Spitfire Labs. Some dulcimer from Spitfire Labs. Oops. Can I play that? Then we have the Cantele again. And this is an interesting one because the guy that made this, he just uploaded it for free on the internet. Like, seriously, it's this patch, and he got this Cantele, which is like a 32, 35 string instrument. It sounds amazing. And he released this patch for free online. And it sounds so cool. It just adds this shimmery quality. And it almost doesn't even sound ethnic, really. It just blends so well with the harp and the piano, and I'm definitely going to be using it a lot from now on. I love it. And then other than that, we just have our penny whistle, which is from Cinewinds Pro. So that is just a quick overview of all the technical aspects, you know, involved with the samples. And then really quickly, I just want to show you this. So this is all of my automation. And I use ModWheel for everything whenever I record, but I always actually draw in automation volume as my expression. So I never draw in expression, you know, via CC11, but I always draw it in via automation because I love to be able to just, you know, show all automation and then see all my expression in front of me, and it allows me just to go in and make quick editorial changes. So that is just a quick little overview of the technical aspects of recreating this piece of music. So thank you so much for watching this video. I personally learned tons from analyzing the score, and I hope that you guys did as well. It's such a beautiful score, brilliantly written, and I feel like I'm just now beginning my journey into it to better understand it. But in the future, I definitely do want to touch on Prince Caspian, because there's even more amazing musical material in that film, and there's more themes, and there's more interesting content, and it's definitely something that deserves its own video. So in the future, if you guys are interested, I'd definitely love to look at Prince Caspian on its sort of its own spotlight. But anyways, if you guys have any questions or recommendations, please put those down below. This is episode 8 of season 2, so there are going to be 2 more episodes after this, and then Behind the Score will be gone for a few months, but we'll be doing other videos having to do with harmony, orchestration, film scoring, etc. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me as usual, and I look forward to the next one, and I will see you guys soon. See ya.